Hey guys, today I am reacting to British vs. American words for home objects by Lost in the Pond. So let's get into it.
Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to words. Specifically and scientifically, words for stuff found around the house. And so once again, in order to do this, I'm going to have to get up off this chair and go from room to room. No, just cut. I'll sit here. I'll go in my own time. Like a lot of people, I keep my cleaning implements in one of these. This is what Americans would call a closet, but sometimes in Britain, we refer to this as a cupboard. Now, since cupboards/closets can get quite dark on the inside,
I mean, we also say cupboard in the US as well. Just, yeah, usually a cupboard is like, not a full closet though. Not a full, like, area. It's like a half area maybe. So like if you have a cupboard where you store your, of course, cups, plates, etc. So like a half sized maybe. That'd be more often referred to as a cupboard.
it's quite a good idea to have one of these around. Partly because it makes it easier to look inside the closet, but also because I like to play horror pranks on my wife. Anyway, in Britain, this is known as a torch, whereas in America, it's a flashlight.
Yep. Flashlight or just a light, but yeah.
My cleaning implement of choice is one of these. I think we all know what this is, but we don't all have the same word for it. In Britain, we might refer to this as a vacuum cleaner, sure, but we might also refer to it as a Hoover. Now, any Americans watching this might be thinking, that's not a Hoover, it doesn't have the Hoover branding on it. So here's the thing, Hoover is an American company that was formed in the early 20th century. It just happens that they were around at the same time as President Herbert Hoover and FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. And the popular belief is that they all sucked, especially the vacuum cleaner. But that's beside the point. The Hoover company marketed their product in Britain, and at some point the word Hoover became a genericized term for vacuum cleaner. And
it doesn't even make sense though. I mean, really? I'm gonna have to side with the US in this case, just because it makes more sense to me as a generic term. I mean, even in the US South, like sometimes they call all soda. They all call it, or soft drinks, they all call it, Coke, after the Coke brand, Coca-Cola. It doesn't make sense to call all soda, soft drinks, Coke, but they do that in the, southeast of the US. So yeah, just logical names make more sense, of course. So, a Hoover, I don't see it.
that's what I mean when I talk about memos that got lost in the pond. In America, you will hear the term vacuum cleaner, but some Americans will call this a sweeper, not to be confused with the defensive position in football, soccer. Now, one of these motorized suck machines is going to be useless without one of these.
An outlet?
In case you're not familiar with plug sockets, who is not familiar with plug sockets? Perhaps people that don't call them plug sockets. To be clear, that's what I call this, having grown up in Britain. But in the US, they might be referred to simply as a socket or an outlet. In fact, either word might be used at different times to denote different applications.
Or just the plug.
This contraption might be described as a socket when you're putting a plug into the wall, but as an outlet when describing the electricity that comes out. And if you're excited to learn more about the physical differences between British and American plugs, be sure to subscribe and hit my bell because that video is coming soon. Now, here's a hypothetical scenario that I definitely just made up. What if you need to vacuum in the other wing of your house, but the other plug sockets, for whatever reason, aren't working? Firstly, call maintenance, but in the meantime, you might want to use one of these. You can't see it here, but this is a very long wire that allows you to move devices over greater distances. In Britain, we might call this a power extender, or I was known to call it an extension lead. From there, it's not too big a stretch to arrive at the American term, extension cord.
Yep.
And you join me now.
Extension cord, yep.
Now in the lounge, or as Americans would call it, the living room. We call it that as well. I actually just wanted to point out that
a lounge would be more like a residential, a lounge would be less often a residential area. It'd be more often for business, a commercial district, a commercial area. There you would have a lounge rather than a living room. But in a house, a home, or apartment, or just residential areas, you would call this a living room. But a lounge, you could call it a lounge as well. Just the main lounge of a house, you would call it a living room usually.
We call it lounge, and also apparently drawing room, although only about 7 people use that term. Anyway, you can probably hear some sounds in the background. That is my voice, Tara's voice, and that of Lavluka.
But it does when I say it, brochure.
Brochure.
In other words, this is now a reaction video of Lavluka's reaction video of Lost in the Pond. I know. This is really meta, and it's difficult to talk over you, Lav, so I'll just let you talk. Anyway, the important thing here is the device I'm using to watch it. In both Britain and America, of course, we often refer to the television as the TV. But in Britain, we also call it the telly, because we just love putting the letter...
Tellies, nah, that's really never used over here. I don't think any American would ever use the word telly. Yeah. Just TV, television.
To Y on the end of an existing word and saying, here you go, here's a new word, right? Think brekkie for breakfast, chocky for chocolates, and Laurie for Lawrence. And of course, this is the 21st century. If I want to change the channel from Lost in the Pond to Lavluka, I don't want to have to get up and do that manually at the TV itself, right? I've got a huge coffee table in the way, not to mention a huge coffee cup. So that's why we have one of these. Where I come from, this is known as a TV remote, right? And you might hear that in the United States too. You might also hear remote in both countries. But I was 26 years old and living in Indiana when I heard a Midwesterner refer to this as a clicker. To this day, I'm not really...
I've heard the term before, but yeah, I guess it's a region-specific thing.
I'm sure whether clicker is a Midwesternism. So if you live in the United States but not the Midwest and still call this a clicker, let me know in the comments below.
I don't call that clicker.
The first
I call that remote.
Word difference to note about a kitchen is possibly the stove. That's the word that Americans perhaps use most commonly to describe the entire unit. In Britain, to describe the exact same thing, we might also use stove, perhaps even oven. But growing up, I was always fond of cooker, which linguistically pairs well with clicker. Second thoughts, do not cook your TV.
Never use the word cooker.
Remotes. Of course, both Britain and America have different names for different parts of the cooker. The top part of the oven, which you might use for boiling eggs or creating impressive B-roll, is known to Brits as the hob. In America, you'll typically hear stovetop. Of course, when it comes to actually eating the food, you can't just use your hands unless you're American. Sometimes you're gonna need a knife and fork, and don't get me wrong, it's not those words that differ, but the collective term we use.
And I remember some people even called the stove just like the actual stove, but even if it's not connected to an oven, they still call it an oven. Like I remember using one of those, I guess, portable stovetops, right? And so someone called that an oven. There's lots of variants in terms.
Used to describe them. In Britain, these would be described as cutlery, or as I like to say, cutlery, because I'm not human. In America, the collective term for the exact same objects is silverware, or more specifically, flatware, because I don't really know why. A spoon doesn't...
Flatware is really not as common.
Look particularly
just cutlery or silverware.
Flat. But from space, neither does the Earth. And then once we're done with the eating, it's time to do the washing up.
Our kitchen utensils.
It's a boring job, but somebody's got to do it. Come here, cat. Dishes. Where you going? But this part in the process comes with quite a few word differences. Firstly, you've got what the British would call washing up liquid. In America, it's dish soap, or as Dawn is trying to push on us, dishwashing liquid. And you can't wash dishes without water, which in Britain comes out of a tap. A common synonym of this in the United States is faucet. And then you dry everything off with what the British would call a...
Oh, we just call it, yeah. We do call it tap a little bit as well, yeah.
Tea towel, and the Americans a dish towel. It looks like a really terrifying puppet. Why are you shaking? Oh, that's me. I'm doing that. Well, here we are again, you and me in my bathroom, except I'm the only one who's actually here and you're just watching, which is worse. All that to say, I'm going to keep this brief now. Have you ever used one of these? It's not a pair of underwear. It is in fact a piece of fabric with which you wash your body. Now, for the sake of time and because the FCC said that I couldn't do this, I'm not going to show it in action. I'm just here to tell you that in Britain we call this a flannel. In America it's often referred to as a washcloth or a face cloth.
Yeah,
that ironically it looks like a puppet without a face. As with the kitchen, the same applies here. We have faucet versus tap. And I couldn't do another segment in the bathroom without talking about the toilet, because that's what I do. Sure, both countries use that very word, but each is absolutely loaded with synonyms. So in Britain, you've got loo, bog, latrine, lavatory, lav, porcelain firing range, and bog. In America, you have the John, the commode, the pot, the potty, the porcelain god, the crapper, and my personal favourite, the bowl. And
yeah,
finally,
I think just toilet, most common.
You may remember in my bedroom video from earlier this year, I talked about how America has walk-in closets and Britain has wardrobes. Now that's not really relevant for this video because the two things are quite different. This was just an excuse to show off our new walk-in closet.
Nice.
These aren't my dresses, by the way. My dresses are over here. But if you come inside, I do have one last thing to show you, and don't worry, it's not a pair of jorts. Now, I know that this might seem sensationally weird, but in this storage facility behind me, I keep things like my underpants. The drawers are see-through, aren't they? Just pretend that what you see here isn't plastic and rubbish, and just imagine that it is in fact made of mahogany. These are just temporary placeholder drawers that we've had for 4 years. Anyway, the point is, in Britain, I would have called this, or its mahogany equivalent, a chest of drawers. In America, no need for any chests around here. It's just drawers. Or apparently some Americans refer to a chest of drawers as a bureau, which would confuse the British and the French for different reasons. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below some of the word differences that you're aware of that pertain to the house. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at LostInThe...
I mean, one thing is, I guess, just like, tinfoil. We call it, tinfoil, aluminum foil, or just aluminum. Whereas the British would probably just call it, I guess from my understanding, just aluminium, right? But, you know what? I mean, aluminium and aluminum are both okay in my opinion. But technically, aluminum actually came first. The inventor, the person who discovered or invented aluminum, used the word aluminum first, but eventually changed it after pressure to aluminium. But yeah, it was first known as aluminum in the US, so... Anyway, that was an interesting video for sure. Enjoyed it. Let's check out some of the comments. Just increase the font size a bit. I'll zoom in, I guess. In America, a chest of drawers is also called a dresser. Oh yeah, a dresser, yep. Torch-wielding mob is a lot less intimidating if it just consists of a bunch of people waving flashlights around. Haha, yeah, true. When I was a kid in the 60s, the TV remote actually made a clicking sound, which is why we called it a clicker. What is called a jug in Britain is usually called a pitcher in the US. I mean, we also called that a jug for sure. I used to just call it a jug when I was young, yeah. I don't really use the word pitcher actually that often. Maybe it's more like a southern thing. I've noticed this several times throughout the years. A jug in the US is usually a fat bottle with small mouth. Oh yeah. I mean that's also a jug too. Those things on the stovetop that sprout flames are also called burners. My mom would say, "Have you checked the stove to see if all the burners have been turned off?" When I was growing up, the word my dad used for a remote was the name of any kid next to the TV. In America, cutlery refers to a set of fancy knives. Does it? I guess it can also just be a generic term. Yeah, on the other hand, plastic cutlery, yeah. Around here, cutlery is a generic term for silverware. Sometimes friends refer to plasticware. We've got the crown, you've got the crown. Now I understand that 90s song with a guy saying a flannel for my face. Temporary placeholder drawers that we've had for 4 years. Most relatable thing you've ever said. Yeah. And the olden thing calling vacuums Hoovers was a thing in the US. My grandma did. Yeah, okay. In the US, a sweeper is a non-electric machine used to quickly clean carpet between vacuuming in such places as a restaurant or office. It's funny how in America we call it a faucet, but we call the water that comes out of it tap water. I also just call it the tap. But, yeah, faucet's just another word. In the US, tap is more used for stuff that comes out of a barrel. Oh, on tap, yeah. Tap beer from a keg. Back in the day, it was a barrel of beer for sure. In America, we mostly use the word tap to either refer to an outdoor faucet, like the ones on the side of a house, or on a barrel or something. I call the outside faucet a spigot, Texas. Yeah, interesting. The equivalent to a walk-in closet would be a dressing room or just a walk-in wardrobe. We also call flatware utensils, or at least we do here in Missouri. Yeah, we also have just utensils as well. Washcloth in the American South, I grew up saying wash rag. I remember washcloth, never wash rag, or rag, just rag. Shower rag or something like that. There are parts of America that refer to a washcloth as a rag. The irony of using a rag to clean your house. We'll call it the same to clean one's body, something else. Well, it's cleaning either way. How is that in any way ironic? Yeah, I don't find it ironic. Anyway, this was an interesting video for sure. Lawrence came up with some interesting points and differences. Yeah, I found it really interesting actually. If you enjoyed my reaction, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.